Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really focusing in on a relentless challenge for enterprise cybersecurity: brute force attacks.
Right.
Think of it like a constant digital siege, attackers just systematically trying to guess their way in login credentials, encryption keys, you name it. It's a serious pressure point, whether you're managing your own data centers or using cloud services.
Absolutely. And for this deep dive, our mission really is to unpack the technical side of things. What challenges do enterprises like yours actually face defending against these attacks?
Okay.
We'll draw on what we know to explore, the different tactics attackers use, the systems they go after, the sophisticated tools involved, and crucially, how a really robust, multi-layered security strategy is just essential for long-term protection.
And we're keeping this focused on the tech details relevant for enterprise infrastructure folks, right? On-prem, cloud, hybrid, the whole lot.
Exactly. That's the plan.
Okay, let's start unpacking that threat landscape then. Because the number of ways attackers try brute force, it's actually quite alarming when you list them out. It's way more than just running a script with common passwords.
Oh, definitely.
Our understanding points to a whole range of techniques. Can you maybe highlight some key ones and why this variety makes defense so tricky?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We see the whole spectrum. You've got your basic, simple brute force, which is literally trying every single possible character combination. Exhausting, but automated.
The classic dictionary definition almost.
Right, but then it gets more targeted.
Right.
Credential stuffing is huge. Attackers take lists of stolen usernames and passwords from, previous breaches on other sites.
And just try them everywhere else, hoping people reuse passwords.
Exactly. It banks on that password reuse habit. Then there's hybrid brute force that combines dictionary lists like common words or phrases with some brute force character swapping, smarter guessing.
So starting with likely candidates, then getting more granular.
Precisely. And scale is a big factor. They use botnets, networks of compromised computers to launch attacks from all over the place. Makes simple IP blocking much harder.
Overwhelms the defenses.
Totally. And good old dictionary attacks are still around, hitting weak passwords. We also see reverse brute force, which is interesting. They'll have one known username, maybe an admin account.
And hammer it with thousands of passwords.
Yep. Instead of one password against many accounts, it's many passwords against one. Then you've got rainbow table attacks for cracking password hashes if they manage to steal the hash file.
Faster cracking, basically.
Much faster. And password spraying is stealthier. They take just a few very common passwords like password 123 or winter 2024 and try them slowly across a large number of different accounts, trying to fly under the radar of account lockout policies.
Avoiding too many failed logins on any single account.
Exactly. And finally, a big one now is attacks targeting specific protocols, especially remote desktop protocol, RDP, very common attack vector.
It really sounds like each type needs a slightly different defensive approach. A single fix won't cover all that.
You nailed it. A basic rate limit might slow down a simple attack from one IP, sure, but it does almost nothing against a credential stuffing attack coming from like 5,000 different IPs in a botnet. And that's where building that resilient enterprise security posture gets, complex.
Okay, so when these attacks happen, where do they usually aim? What are the prime targets inside an enterprise?
Well, based on what we see in industry reports, several areas are consistently hit hard. VPN gateways are a huge one.
Because that's the door to the internal network, right?
Precisely. A compromise there is major. Active Directory authentication endpoints also critical. They control who gets access to what.
Makes sense.
Cloud service portals are massive targets now. Think Microsoft 365, AWS, Salesforce. Tons of sensitive data lives there.
Right, getting into those is like hitting the jackpot for an attacker.
Absolutely. Beyond those big ones, we see lots of attacks on admin interfaces for web apps and network gear, public-facing stuff too, like intranets, employee logins, customer portals.
Anything facing the outside world, basically.
Pretty much. And specific network protocols are constantly probed. RDP, usually TCP port 3389 and SSH on TCP port 22, non-stop scanning for those. API endpoints and other services you might expose need careful security too.
Yeah.
And we can't forget IoT devices or older legacy systems. They often have weak or even default credentials.
Easy first steps for an attacker.
Yeah, they can be an easy way to get that initial foothold.
So it's a mix of high-value targets giving broad access and maybe some less secure systems acting as entry points. What really makes them so attractive?
It really boils down to two things: the potential payoff and how accessible they are. Compromising these systems can lead to, massive data theft, financial fraud, ransomware deployment. or attackers just using your systems to launch other attacks.
Right.
And many of these targets are, by design, accessible remotely or across the network. So they present a reachable attack surface.
Okay, we've covered the what and the where. Let's get into the how. Attackers aren't sitting there typing passwords manually. It's all automated. What kind of tools are we talking about, and what tricks do they use to sneak past defenses?
You're spot on. Automation is key for them. Tools like Hydra and Medusa are very common for automating login attempts against network services like SSH or FTP.
Okay.
For web applications, Burp Suite Intruder is a really powerful tool for brute-forcing login forms. And if they get hold of password hashes, tools like Hashcat are indispensable for cracking them offline.
So these aren't niche tools. They're pretty widely available and powerful, lowers the barrier to entry.
Precisely. And attackers don't just rely on the raw power of these tools. Evasion is a huge part of their game plan.
How so?
Well, they use those botnets we mentioned, distributing attacks across tons of IPs to get around basic IP blocking or rate limiting.
Right.
Capture cheat, the prove you're human tests. They increasingly bypass those using optical character recognition, OCR, or even third-party CAPTCHA solving services.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. They also try anti-rate limiting tricks like constantly rotating the HTTP headers or user agent strings in their request to look more like legitimate browser traffic.
Trying to blend in.
Exactly. And to get around IP address blocks or geographic restrictions, they use proxies, compromised residential IP addresses, anonymizers like Tor, makes attribution and blocking much harder.
It really is a constant cat and mouse game. So with attackers getting this sophisticated, how can enterprises actually detect these attempts reliably in these complex environments?
Yeah, detection is key, and it has to be smart. Anomaly detection is really central here. Instead of just looking for known bad signatures, you're looking for deviations from normal behavior.
What does that look like in practice?
This is where SIM security information and event management and SOAR security orchestration, automation, and response platforms are absolutely crucial. Think Stonefly 365 GDR and Stonefly SA365. They pull in logs and events from all over your network, firewalls, servers, Active Directory, cloud platforms, applications.
All the data together.
Exactly. And then they correlate it. So the system might see, say, 50 failed login attempts for one user account coming from 10 different countries within 5 minutes. That's not normal.
Right, that pattern screams attack.
Or maybe logins happening at 3 a.m. for a user who only ever works 9 to 5. It's about connecting those dots that individually might not seem alarming.
Makes sense.
User and Entity Behavior Analytics, or UEBA, takes this further. It builds baseline profiles of normal activity for users and devices. And then it flags significant deviations, like a user suddenly accessing sensitive files they never touch, or an admin account logging in from an unusual location. These could indicate a compromised account or an ongoing attack.
So behavioral analysis.
Exactly. And of course, failed login logs and rate limiting alerts are vital inputs. Threat intelligence feeds too, knowing about current attack campaigns, malicious IPs, that helps a lot. The key, though, is continuously tuning those detection rules and thresholds. You want to catch the real threats without drowning in false alarms. And that's where Stonefly's integrated detection comes in, providing real-time alerts and even triggering automated responses.
Okay, detection is vital, but what about stopping these attacks before they even succeed? What are the best prevention strategies?
Prevention needs that defense-in-depth approach. Strong password policies are absolutely fundamental.
Like length, complexity.
Yeah, length, complexity, making sure they're unique, changing them regularly. All that basic hygiene is still super important. Account lockout policies too, temporarily locking an account after, say, 5 failed attempts. That slows attackers down.
Deters the brute force.
Right. But honestly, the single most critical preventative measure today is multi-factor authentication, MFA.
Absolutely. That second factor just makes a huge difference.
It really does. It means even if an attacker does get the password through credential stuffing or guessing, they still can't log in without that second factor.
Like a code from an app or a text message.
Exactly. It could be an SMS code, a time-based code from an authenticator app like Google or Microsoft Authenticator, a physical hardware token you plug in, or even biometrics. It drastically cuts the risk.
What else on prevention side?
PPTCHA helps filter out basic bots on login pages. IP address restrictions, maybe only allowing logins to admin panels from specific trusted IPs or internal networks that shrinks the attack surface.
Good point.
Comprehensive logging and monitoring of all login activity is crucial for seeing what's happening. Rate-limiting login attempts, maybe adding small delays after failed tries, that hinders the speed of attacks.
Slows them down, Kim.
Yeah, and adaptive authentication is becoming more common. It assesses the risk of a login attempt based on factors like location, device, time of day. And if the risk score is high, it might demand extra verification, like MFA, even if the password was right. It adds a dynamic layer. And again, Stonefly solutions help enforce and integrate these kinds of measures across your infrastructure.
So it's really about building multiple walls for the attacker to climb. Makes sense. Now let's dive a bit deeper technically. Our sources mention limitations with flow-based detection. Can you explain what that is and where it falls short for brute force?
Sure. Flow-based detection looks at network traffic metadata. Think of it like call records for network connections, who talked to whom, when, for how long, using which protocols, how much data was sent.
But not the actual content of the conversation.
Exactly. It doesn't typically look inside the packets, the payload. It's analyzing aggregated flow records, often generated by routers or firewalls. It's less resource-intensive than deep packet inspection.
So it's efficient, but you lose detail.
That's the core trade-off. That information loss is a key limitation. The payload might contain clues about an attack that you just don't see in the flow record.
Okay, what else?
Collection delays are another issue. Flow records are often exported based on timers, like when a connection is idle for a certain time or just on a regular interval, maybe every 5 minutes.
5 minutes, that sounds like a long time in an attack scenario.
It can be. A fast brute force attack might succeed before the relevant flow records are even exported and analyzed. By the time you detect it, the breach has happened. And one more thing, packet sampling. In really busy networks, devices might only sample a fraction of the packets to generate flow data, just to keep up.
So you're not even seeing all the connections.
Right. And that sampling heavily biases the flow characteristics, the number of flows, the byte counts. They might not accurately reflect what's truly happening, making it harder to reliably spot anomalies like a brute force attempt.
That makes sense. If you're only seeing part of the picture, it's hard to judge. So knowing these limitations exist, what kind of clever evasion techniques might attackers use specifically to bypass flow-based monitoring?
Well, attackers who understand how flow analysis works can definitely try to game the system. One technique is attack function separation.
What does that mean?
They might use different compromised machines for different phases. One machine does the initial port scanning, another set does the actual password guessing, maybe another handles data exfiltration if they get in.
So distributing the malicious activity across IPs.
Exactly. It makes it harder for a flow-based system looking for a single IP address, exhibiting all the signs of an attack from start to finish.
Sneaky. What else?
Hiding under the detection threshold. Flow systems often use statistical thresholds like alert if more than X failed logins per minute from one IP.
Right.
So attackers can deliberately slow down their attack. They keep the rate of attempts just below that threshold, maybe spreading it out over hours or days. It's low and slow.
Trying to look like noise rather than an attack signal.
Precisely. Temporal distortions are another trick. They introduce random small delays between login attempts. This messes up any detection algorithms looking for periodic, machine-like patterns in the timing of connections.
Making it look less automated.
Yeah. And finally, there's flow stretching. They might try to manipulate the attack traffic itself, maybe keeping connections open longer than necessary, or sending extra dummy data to make the flows look more like legitimate long-lived sessions rather than rapid-fire login attempts.
Wow. It really underscores why relying only on flow data isn't enough. You need more layers.
Absolutely. You need that correlation across different data sources, including payload inspection where possible and behavioral analysis.
Okay. Now, we've really hammered home the importance of MFA. Let's get practical. How does an enterprise actually go about implementing and managing MFA effectively, especially in cloud environments like Azure or Google Cloud?
Yeah, good question. The good news is the major cloud providers make it relatively straightforward, though the specifics vary. In Azure Cloud, it generally starts within Azure Active Directory.
Okay.
You enable Azure AD multi-factor authentication, often through conditional access policies. Then you decide which authentication methods you'll support. The Microsoft Authenticator app is common, but also phone calls, SMS, hardware tokens.
So you choose the options for your users.
Right. You configure a policy saying when MFA is required maybe for all users or specific roles or when accessing certain apps or logging in from untrusted networks. Then you guide users through registering their chosen method.
And for Google Cloud, similar idea.
Pretty similar. It's typically managed through Google Workspace admin settings. You enable two-step verification, Choose the methods, Google Authenticator, security keys, backup codes, phone prompts. You can set policies, often based on organizational units, and then users enroll their methods.
So the platforms provide the tools. But what are the key things to think about for the actual configuration and ongoing user support? It's not just flicking a switch, is it?
Definitely not. Several things are crucial. First, carefully choose the allowed methods. Balance security needs with user convenience and accessibility. Using only SMS, for instance, is less secure than authenticator apps or hardware keys due to SIM swapping risks. Enforce MFA broadly. Don't just protect admins. Protect all users, especially for any kind of remote access or access to sensitive data. Integration with your existing identity system, like on-prem Active Directory if you have it, is important for a smoother user experience.
Single sign-on benefits.
Exactly. Communication and training are massive. You have to explain why you're doing MFA, what the benefits are, and provide crystal clear, easy instructions on how users set it up and use it day to day.
Avoid user frustration.
Absolutely. And plan for ongoing support. What happens when a user loses their phone or their hardware token breaks? You need processes for that. If you have a BYOD, bring your own device policy.
Right, personal phones for MFA.
Yeah. You might need mobile device management, MDM solutions, to ensure those personal devices meet minimum security standards before they can be used for corporate access or MFA.
Makes sense.
And finally, keep educating users on secure MFA practices. Be wary of unexpected MFA prompts that could be an attacker trying to trick them into approving a login. Keep devices secure. Use strong primary passwords too. Only download authenticator apps from official stores.
It really sounds like a combination of technical setup, clear policy, and continuous user education and support.
That's the recipe for success with MFA.
Okay, so let's bring this all together. If an enterprise really leans into robust security, maybe using solutions like Stonefly's, to aggressively fight these brute force attacks, what are the real long-term results and benefits they see?
The long-term payoffs are significant, touching security, operations, and the bottom line. The absolute biggest one is a drastically reduced risk of unauthorized access and data breaches.
Which are incredibly expensive.
Hugely expensive.
Yeah.
We know the average cost hit almost $5 million in 2024, and it's way higher in sectors like healthcare. So preventing those breaches is paramount. This proactive defense naturally leads to a much stronger overall security posture, making you more resilient not just to brute force, but other threats too. Compliance is another big win. Strong brute force protection helps meet requirements and regulations like GDPR, IPA, PCI DSS, avoiding hefty fines.
Right, avoids penalties.
And leveraging automation, like AirSAR capabilities for detection and response, boosts operational efficiency. Your security team isn't bogged down manually chasing every minor alert. They can focus on higher-level threats and strategy.
Frees up resources.
Exactly. Ultimately, it means better protection for your critical assets, your data, your systems, your reputation, whether they're on-prem or in the cloud. It significantly cuts the potential financial and reputational fallout from security incidents.
So it really pays off across the board: less risk, better compliance, more efficiency, stronger protection. It's about building a more secure and resilient business long term.
That's the goal.
This has been a really insightful deep dive into the technical side of fighting brute force attacks. For everyone listening, if you want a deeper understanding of how Stonefly can specifically protect your enterprise from these threats and help build that long-term security, we really encourage you to reach out. You can contact our sales team directly at sales@stonefly.com or give us a call at +1 510 0265 1616. Of course, there's also tons of info on our website at www.stonefly.com.
Absolutely. And maybe just a final thought to leave you with as you reflect on all this. Given how the threat landscape keeps evolving, how confident are you really in your current defenses against these increasingly sophisticated brute force methods? What proactive steps could you take, maybe starting today, to build a stronger, more resilient security foundation?
That's a great question to ponder.
And to explore how Stonefly's solutions can be tailored specifically to your environment and help you answer that question, please reach out. Again, that's sales@stonefly.com, phone +1 510 265 616, or find us online at www.stonefly.com.